Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Sanabria, host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast and principal researcher at the Defenders Initiative. Welcome to this webcast sponsored by Big ID. Today, Dart Strickland, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager at Big ID, is joining me for a conversation on AI governance. How you doing, Dart?
Adrian, I am good, and it's good to be here, and it's good to see a fellow um, hair connoisseur in the room with me today. Usually, I'm the hair guy, but we've got this covered, man.
There's you literally got this covered, right? There's a lot of baldness in our field, I guess. So it's good to represent the other side. Hang on to it when you got it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
No offense to anyone, I hope. It looks like you're well prepared. You got something, coffee, tea there. What have you got with you?
Yeah, just drinking some black coffee this morning, so
Excellent.
I'm ready to go.
I get a latte myself, so I am caffeinated and good to go. All right, folks in the audience, I would like to direct your attention to the blue buttons at the bottom of your screen. The first one of those is a chat button. You can chat with other attendees. You can chat with us. You can ask questions there if you want. There is a dedicated Q&A button. You can use that for your questions as well, but chat works just as well. I will be checking there throughout the webinar and answering questions as they come up. And last but not least, I believe we have a link in the handout. So the second to last blue button from the right-hand side there looks like Adapt Responsible AI with Big ID. Yeah, that is a link there. Sometimes we got PDFs, sometimes we got links. So make sure you check that out. You can click that at any time during the webinar. And let's get into it. All right. So AI governance. I feel like, Dart, we need to provide some some explanation here, just so everybody understands what we mean when we say AI governance, because it's one of those broad terms that probably means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think when we talk about AI is the hottest thing in the world right now, right? So when I think AI governance, I think it's about managing the risk and control around AI usage for responsible and compliant AI, right? So how can we best be managing those risk and controls for what's out there, especially when it comes to this newish technology that everybody's embracing.
Yeah, and this is I do a lot of advisory work for enterprises, and this is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, advisory call that I take. Just security folks, not just security, but pretty much anybody concerned with governance, the legal team, the IT folks are just feeling overwhelmed with not only generative AI tools, but generative AI shoved into existing tools, right? It's just
Of course.
magically showing up in all the tools you're already paying for, that's already deployed in the enterprise. So that's it's kind of stressful for folks, I feel like, as well. And I think I don't think we've ever seen a tech trend catch on quite this quickly, and everybody just feels, and this is the impression I get, a bit unprepared for all of it.
Hmm. For sure. For sure. Yeah. I think the thing, maybe if we go back like to the early 2000s, mid 2000s, when, remember the data is the new oil, like campaign slogan came out, and everybody was just
Yeah.
ingesting as much data as they could really, really quick, without any really guardrails around it, right? No real governance around it. And I think we have the ability now with this new trend, to really put those guardrails around it, to actually do it right, because it's important, right? It's important to have ethics in it. It's important to make sure that the right data gets fed into these models so that the wrong data doesn't come out.
Yeah, data is the new oil. I've heard data is the new gold, but I've also heard a counterpoint to that data is the new uranium. In that,
Oh,
yes, it is valuable, but also kind of dangerous, right?
sure,
Like
sure.
most of the FTC fines that we see today are for storing too much customer data, not getting
Hmm.
rid of customer data that you can't make a good justification for hanging on to.
Right. Because the AI trend is coming, when it is now, and because we came through the data is the new oil, gold, uranium, plutonium, 1.21 gigawatts, whatever it is, right? We have the ability actually to take what we've learned through that trend, and perpetuate it forward, right? Of saying, okay, because AI, the base, if you go all the way back, if you peel all the layers back, uh, the foundation is data, right? And so if we can have some governance, some clean data, if we have controls around what our data looks like, then it's a little bit easier to govern AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that data comes into every single one of those AI governance conversations I was talking about earlier, because I think one of the magical things that things like Microsoft Copilot is doing is kind of shining. I say magical, probably not the word a lot of folks in this position would use, but it's becoming this magnifying glass for all their data hygiene issues and all their data
Right.
governance issues. So because like the whole use case there is my data's a mess. I don't know what's where. So one of the big use cases in the enterprise here is, you just talk to a chatbot and find what you're looking for. And
Right.
to enable that use case, we got to give it access to a whole lot of data, and we don't know exactly what's in that whole lot of data. So I imagine, like, do you see customers, like, is the big, where do you start here? Right. Is it discovery, classification, like just figuring out what you've got? Is that kind of the starting point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's, step one is discovery, right? We have to know, businesses, customers have to know where their sensitive data is, right? Where their personal data is, where their crown jewels are. Because once you have that, right, we can discover it, we can classify it, and then we can tell, hey, is this data that shouldn't be fed into this model actually going into it? I don't want any kind of AI model fed with darts information, right? With my personal
Mm-hmm.
information. We've heard the stories of, right, that these companies have, and they're probably not true, but it makes good conjecture, that these companies feed, like, oh, let's just put everything into here, and then some lowly schmuck then types in and says, what's the CEO's salary, and then boom, it pops up because now we fed everything into there. And I don't want my data in there, right? And so if we have to discover where that sensitive data is. Big ID does that great. It's really kind of our foundation, where we came from, of just discovery, right? Where is it? So that's step one for sure.
Yeah, well, I get bad news for you there. These models need so much data that like it's just a giant vacuum cleaner. I suspect that
Mm-hmm.
even the companies building these foundation models, they don't know what data's in there. There's at that scale, at the this
Yeah.
petabyte, exabyte scale that they're hoovering up data and using as training. There's no time to pick through there and make sure there's no PII in there, or yeah,
Yeah.
anything you find out in the internet, probably in a model,
Right.
probably
Right. And
baked in.
I think, I mean, that is the scary part, right? Especially when you're talking about these huge LLMs. I think where we have the ability to play in that is these companies that are creating their own, right? Of saying, hey, for what we're doing as a company, company X, what they're doing as a company when they're building their model, like, it's super important that they don't leak that data, right? That data stays confined within their environments.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of different. There's so much to talk around. Like if you're using something like Glean on-prem, if you're building an application that's going to be customer facing, like the kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff you need to worry about is much more in depth. You got to take it much more seriously there than if your employees are just using Copilot or something like ChatGPT
Right.
Enterprise here. So, good point in the comments. We need controls around the data, but also control around the models themselves. So,
Of
tuning
course.
those models, evaluating, And I think there is no replacement for just doing adversarial prompting, just, asking for the CEO's, well, in a lot of cases, CEO salary is one of the few salaries that is public, right? CEO
Right.
compensation, if it's a public company or something like that. But I was on a call with a client a couple of months ago and explaining the importance of adversarial prompting with them. And they were testing out Copilot. And somebody typed in, show me passwords. And sure enough, there was a like ODBC, JDBC file on SharePoint, which is something that you give an application so it knows how to log into databases, right? And username, password, database connect string, gave it to them like that, found passwords. So that's the only way you know for sure. Type in the stuff you don't want to see an answer to and see what you get back.
Right. Yeah, that's I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it right now.
Yeah. So some good comments in the chat already. So Charles says, before we govern AI, don't we need to know where it's being used? How would you folks recommend that we identify the instances where AI is being used? And then Mary says, where and what?
Yeah, I mean, I think for what we do, right, you've got to know where you have to know where that data is or what that model is, right, and what you're feeding into that model. So what Big ID is, it scans that data before it gets fed into the model. So that's a bit of our use case. So if we can scan that data for that PII, the personal data, those crown jewels, the sensitive data, then we can keep it from moving. How we identify just at large scale what those are, I don't know if I have an answer to that.
Yeah. I mean, we already have a lot of tools that help with governance. Like if you've got, any kind of like a Palo Alto or a Zscaler, or, anything that is in line with employees, that can tell you what websites they're going to, what they're using. There are a lot of tools out there that already have a database of all your applications and can generally, they've built a category called generative AI, probably. So that's not a bad place to start. And so there's like the shadow IT side of it, and then I feel like there's the intentional company project side of it. And maybe what we're talking about today is more the, okay, we're going to build an internal chat GPT. And I've talked to many companies that have already done this, that say, okay, we've got a bunch of data. We think we could get a lot of value out of this. And they go after, AWS Bedrock or Glean or something like that, where you kind of choose your own model, build it internally. And that's where you have a bit more control because it's not shadow IT. You're choosing what data to hand to it. But maybe that data is still petabytes in the terabytes or petabytes or something like that. You still need to figure out what's going on in that data.
Absolutely.
All right. Having trouble keeping up with the good stuff in the chat here. Somebody said their bagel this morning had Gen AI added to it. I asked it how it tasted, and he said it tasted fine, but I got charged extra for every bite. And I feel like that really kind of summarizes these big tech companies building these foundation models. I don't think they're ever going to see a positive return on what they spent on Gen AI. Like it's just, it's not 10xing everybody in the way that they promised it would.
Right. It is. I mean, with all of the risk and the mitigation of those risks, right? There is so much positive as well, right? I mean, Gen AI helps me on a day-to-day basis. It probably helps you on a day-to-day basis as well. So it's that balance between, right? We got to make sure that we're safe and secure, and as well as we've got to get the output from it as well.
Yeah. So, before we get into data governance itself, just talking about regulations and AI ethics, I could have prepared a little bit more for this. I actually have a list of all the regulations I'm tracking here. But as fast as this has come to market, I feel like there's a lot of good work here. There's a lot of guides on, both compliance with AI, frameworks for how to tackle this stuff. Is there anything particular that you're focused on in the work
Yeah,
that you guys do?
yeah. So we have the ability to and within the tool itself to take these policies and actually when we're scanning through the data to surface those, right? To say, hey, here's what we found. It's either in compliance or out of compliance of this policy, and then raise that as well. So as fast as these are coming in, we're injecting them into the tool so that it's not a total separate stream of work, right? So we're at the data level, and we've been doing that for a long time, both with privacy, right? We started in privacy, so a lot of those privacy regulations built in,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have our sea legs about us with those, so we can surface those. And now, as we move into AI, it was a natural flow. We were in a good place. We already had the foundation for it. So now, as we're scanning through the data for our customers, they will then surface those policies and things that could be out of compliance.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you want to know if you're walking into a GDPR fine, right? Before you allow access to this thing.
The whole, it's funny because I spent 7 years at a little shoe company in Beaverton, Oregon, working both in privacy
Mm-hmm.
and in governance. And really, the whole impetus of bringing Big ID on in the first place was that they said, "Hey, we need to know for GDPR, right, where our data is." So for Nike, if you go to the store and collect data, they collect it in one place. You go online, they collect it in another. You go to like a Dick's Sporting Goods, right? They collect it in yet another. And there was no way to really stitch that data across, right? To know where all of Dart's data was. So really the big stick that we had in the early days, super early days of Big ID, and then the kind of the early days of privacy GDPR for Nike was that we had that GDPR, big stick that we could wield of saying, hey, do you want to pay $1 billion in fines? No, let us scan your data. Especially from the inside Nike angle. So those compliance issues are really, they're for our safety, right? They're not just out there to collect money. They are there to help guide where we should be going.
Yeah, and that's why I think that kind of that data is the new uranium model
Mm-hmm.
works pretty well here, because there's still this one side of the business pushing to collect as much data as possible, sees value in data, and then the other side saying, look, these potential fines, like especially GDPR has some real teeth. I mean, we do see FTC handing out a lot of these fines too, but they're almost embarrassing when compared to the GDPR fines. Those are literally orders of magnitude larger. And we do see Facebook, big companies like Facebook getting hit with massive, like multi-billion-dollar fines.
Right. Yeah, and Big ID helps at Nike. It helped us to make sure that we were in compliance with those, right? So with that, we weren't doing any cross-border data transfer, that we weren't doing those things that really could hit us. So it's really more preventative than reactionary.
Yeah. Something else to consider, just a note I have here. I've talked to a lot of people where, maybe you can't use AI at all with a particular partner or customer, something like that. I'm starting to see a lot of legal contracts that prohibit you from using AI to do certain things. So that's something to keep an eye on. And,
For sure.
And then AI safety has already been hinted at in the comments. I think doing evaluations, this is more of a concern for me when you're building an application internally and exposing that. So I think AI safety just becomes something that should be built into your CI/CD model. And every time you change a code, the system prompting, the model itself, the fine tuning for the model, that could change the outputs. It's very sensitive, that kind of thing. Even not changing anything, you'll get different outputs on different days, different hours of the day. Just the non-deterministic nature of some of these models. So yeah, so that's important to consider as well. You hear it called AI safety evaluation. Basically, it's just throwing prompts and making sure you get okay results back from it, and making sure that it can't be jailbroken, made to do malicious things, that kind of stuff. Where we've already seen some headlines from some company that didn't have good protections in place there, and were able to get these chatbots to do embarrassing things, or even create policy, and kind of mess with the business somewhat.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's all that safety piece, man. I think, uh, and maybe this AI movement, if or trend or whatever it's called, new reality, surfacing some of those things that probably should have been in place for a long time, right? Even going back to the day to day, it's like maybe those things that we're now seeing that the end user, right, is now experiencing, uh, that maybe, and by maybe I mean absolutely, should have been in place a long time ago. So I think we're catching up to ourselves when it comes to protection, and
Yeah.
so I hope that trend continues. As much of a pain it is to do, it's the right thing to do, right? It's the right thing for me and for you and for all end users out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to throw out some of the standards we've already seen, NIST has its AI risk management framework. Japan has its own AI guidelines. We're seeing more and more like region specific stuff. The EU AI Act, OWASP. If you go to genai.owasp.org, I feel like they're adding new things every single day. There's a ton of good frameworks and tools there. ISO 42001 was just mentioned in the chat. And to answer the question in the chat, Dart, so you don't have to try and follow the chat. Also, the question was, do you see any orgs actually using ISO 42001? And for me, I'm seeing it almost every other day. I see some
Mm.
mention of people using that new ISO framework for generative AI.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's on the rise, right? For sure.
CISA had guidance on deploying AI systems securely. So one thing to throw out here: if you're not building it internally, and if you're not planning on exposing it to the general public, a lot of this stuff applies to you less. Your
Mhm.
concerns, I think, are more around data leaks, around governance of employee use of applications, and a lot of these frameworks, like the NIST AI RMF and the OWASP Top 10, focus a lot more. You kind of assume that you're building your own stuff internally with some of these foundation models. Um, yeah, I don't think building, like training your own model, is cheap enough that I see individual companies doing it outside the big tech companies. But more like, you'll see a lot of people saying that they made a custom model, like Cisco announced that they've got some kind of security specific model, and that's not. They didn't train that from the ground up. That's basically took like Llama, one of these open
Mm.
source models, and fine tuned it. So you do see a lot of fine tuning going on.
Yeah, I think that trends, right. They're so massive, and so and we're hearing, right, in our industry, right, of other companies that are doing, saying they're doing it, right, but are they?
Yeah. Yeah, still trying to get through all these questions here. So GDPR fines, I thought they were 2% of global revenue, but maybe that was the introductory rate, and now they're up to 4%. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure there, but it is significant. And
4% was
and
the, yeah.
I've
I was gonna
seen
say 4%
8,000.
was the, sorry, Adrian.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, there's no bottom end to it either. Like, if you're a smaller
Yeah.
organization, I've seen $8,000 GDPR fines levied. Small shops with a dozen people can get hit with GDPR fines. So from Facebook on down.
Hmm.
Yeah, and apparently the AI Act fines could be up to 7% of annual turnover,
Oof.
higher than GDPR. So yeah, that's crazy. I don't think it's going to slow down adoption at all, though. I think
No,
horses out of the
yeah, I
barn.
think, agreed. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? It's out.
So Norman asks, what key tenets do you suggest in an AI usage policy for from an AI governance point of view? Any thoughts there, Dart?
Um, I I think when we talk about what you're looking for, um, yeah, let me put my head around that.
So just to share my thoughts while you noodle on that, I think training is one of the most important things here. Helping people understand what happens to their data when they maybe upload it into like a chat GPT and ask it questions
Mm,
about a spreadsheet. Some of these SaaS tools are opt in, which means they can look at the data that you upload and you put in there. Some of them are opt out, where by default you're fine. Usually the enterprise accounts, things like that. So I remember seeing a survey while I was at RSA last week. Said something like 70% of people are using like their personal Gmail account and stuff like that with AI tools, with a lot of these AI tools. So I think that opt in, by default,
hmm
they can look at your prompt data. They can look at the spreadsheets that you uploaded to prompt on, or whatever other data you uploaded. I think there's probably a lot of that going on. So I think that's one of the key things, being aware of what happens to your data when you upload it. If ChatGPT is allowed to train on it, to inspect it, to use it for other things, and every time I say OpenAI or ChatGPT, you can imagine I'm saying Anthropic or Claude or Gemini or any
hmm
of the other ones. Because they all pretty much have the same features now where you can upload data and ask about it. But yeah, I would really focus on training a lot, making sure people understand where hallucination occurs, what the data flow is for any data that they use with any of these tools. And I think that's why I've seen a lot of organizations building their own internal ones, is to kind of redirect people. If somebody tries to go to ChatGPT, your CASB or SASE tool or whatever says, hey, we have an internal thing and we would prefer you
Yep.
use that instead. So kind of
Right.
funneling people towards the more controlled, corporate thumbs up tool.
Right, and it also makes sure that that information doesn't get out. Right, if I'm not training that bigger model now, it's part of our internal deal. When you had said earlier about companies like not being able to use it at all. When I was at Nike, ChatGPT came on the scene, and it wasn't blocked at first, so we had 2 weeks of unfettered access, and then all of a sudden done, shut off, right? Like, don't use it. You can't use it. It was blocked by every internal system. And then, eventually they got around to building their own, right? Let's funnel these people back in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the best parts of it and secure it, make sure that it's safe, make sure that it's got the controls, the governance around it, so that we can, that the right things and the wrong things don't come in or go out.
I think one of the most innovative things I'm seeing with generative AI models right now are smaller models. It is really data privacy, are
hmm
use cases and tools built around data privacy. So with DeepSeek, more and more we're seeing models that can run okay on your average laptop. You don't need a GPU for inference. You can we're seeing stuff that you could run on phones. There's even work being done to do the put the AI model itself in a web session in your Chrome tab, right? Load it in via JavaScript and run it in Chrome, as if Chrome didn't use enough RAM already, right? But you know, with that, these are obviously less powerful models if you want to be able to run it on a phone, on a laptop, in a browser tab.
hmm
So hallucination is going to be higher with them. So again, training comes in super important there, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It was just
So yeah, let's talk.
it's a,
Let's get a bit into the data governance stuff, and we'll get back to some of these questions. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in the chat. If you're here and you're not checking out the chat right now, you're missing a lot of good stuff. A lot of people sharing their thoughts on this as well. So, Data governance is huge, right? Like any company that's been around for over 20 years has over 100 employees. I think it's safe to say they've got this problem to some extent. So where do you usually see people start with this? How would you prioritize this at Nike, for example?
Yeah. So the first step was for us was finding or really identifying where the consumer data lived, right? So because they were collecting data in all different silos, we had to identify, I think it was like 21 priority one systems that were like, all right, we're going to go scan these, right? We're going to go look for these. We're going to go scan these with Big ID to see what we can find as far as PII personal data that live in here. So it's really starting with the priority system of saying, okay, we know here's where our data is, and we know here's the systems that they live in holistically, the big ones, right? And then it's starting with those and saying, all right, let's go scan for this sensitive data and see what we find. The cool thing with what we found at Nike with Big ID was that we're not just scanning for data that we know, but it's also showing us data that we didn't know was there. For example, when we were scanning for Adrian and for Dart, right, we said, hey, go find the Nike's ID, go find email, first name, last name, address, and then it found that, but also started to pull back other things and saying, because we were able to correlate the data of saying, oh, hey, we found this data, name, address, email, but we also found location data where you actually went on a run in your neighborhood, and we didn't tell it to look for that. The tool knew because of correlation that that's what it would find. So now I have this location data of where I was when I went on a run by itself, right? That's not sensitive data, really, right? It's just plots on a map. But once you start combining,
unless you're Secret Service or military,
exactly,
which has happened,
right? Yeah, then that is super. Yeah, but for me, and I don't know your security clearance, but for me, right, that wasn't the case. But also
expired.
For me, running,
that's what it is.
But for me, also running isn't a thing. So maybe I'm the bad example.
Yeah.
But it was able to pull that back, and so now we have another data point, right? We have another piece of sensitive data that we now can collect, or that we now can mark and say, hey, here is where Dart's data is. And then that just kind of took us down a path at Nike of saying, okay, now we have these 21 systems that have been scanned, right? What's next? And then just kind of going and just letting the data kind of take us there, right? It kind of we asked a lot of these business units, right? What's your data map look like? Where's your data flowing, right? Help us to then get started, and then we can actually show you a little bit as well once we get down the road. So, having a starting place of knowing just in general what we're looking for was kind of the expedient to that. And we started that in privacy, stood the tool up, and then privacy came along and said, hey, we don't actually own any tools here. That's owned by global tech. And so that's when we got kicked out of privacy and landed in data governance, and then had this use case of like, okay, I'm collecting, or I'm marking all this data for GDPR to be able to check the box. What does that actually look like from a governance standpoint? Oh, hey, we're scanning all this data. We have all this metadata. Oh, we can feed our data catalog, right? Now we're starting to build a bigger use case than just, doing something to check a box for GDPR. Now we can actually do something around the cleanliness of our data, the what our data is, where it is, and actually have that verified, right? Have that validated by the teams who actually own the data. So it was just kind of a natural progression, but where you start is where that data is, or where you think the lion's share of that data is. At least that's how we did it.
Right. And I think that's so powerful because like we've all seen the data breach where, I'm pretty sure they don't know if any data was stolen because they didn't have the monitoring there. They didn't know where their data was. They didn't know how much of their data was there, if it included customer data. So what you see in the press release, right, is just a select count of all their data in all their databases, and
Right.
here's the records compromised because since we don't have that level of visibility, we have to assume it was everything, right? But this idea that you could pinpoint and say, well, the attackers only had access to this. It's what the IR folks are telling us. Now we can be precise about what happened, what was accessed, and be more precise when protecting people when those kinds of unfortunate events happen. But tell me a little bit more about data catalog, what a data catalog is, and how you use it.
Yeah. So, data catalog is just an
Because it's
organized
a fairly new
inventory.
term for me.
Yeah.
Like that's a term that I've just learned maybe a couple months ago.
Really? It's just an
Yeah.
organized inventory of all the data assets across an organization. So you think of it as like and this is going to date me. I'm going to lose half of our audience. It's like the Dewey Decimal System, the card catalog, right? You pull it out and you're like, oh, here's where all these books live. So way back in the day, we didn't have computers. We had to go and pull out. Anyway, so what it yeah, I lost myself. Basically it's just an index of where data is, and then what it allows is from a governance standpoint, for these owners of the data to go in and say, yes, this is the right data, or no, this is not the right data, or yes, this data is available to use. Right, this is actually verified good data. Go use it in your training sets. Go use it in building your stuff that data scientists build. Go use it. Or no, you cannot use this because this has PII or personal data in it. So really kind of gives you a more clean look, holistic look at an organization level. So that's the idea of a data catalog. And what Big ID does with that is it helps enhance that, right? It helps feed that. So now we can mark these things that have this PII in there, either direct or indirect, much like the location data that I was talking about, right? So as it feeds into a data catalog, then we can say, oh, hey, this is now PII because it has this combination, right? Or, oh, this is toxic combination of these two attributes. No, you cannot use this in your, you got to get consent for this before you use it. So all of those pieces together is the very fun world of data governance and what a data catalog does or should do.
Yeah, and we did get confirmation in the comments that it is 4% of your company's global revenue. So you can attach that to that catalog and say, well, here's what you're risking. When you check out this data set, when you pull this data set onto your laptop, or whatever data scientists are potentially doing with that data, or developers doing with that data.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think another thing to think about when we're talking about governance and data catalog, and we're starting to see this. I sat in a couple of meetings over the last couple of weeks where I heard two different things, right? One that was saying, hey, where does AI live within our environment, right? Who owns it? And then I heard a stat that just said something like, 80% of data, the CDO organization owns AI. And then I sat in another one that was with more security driven, and they're like 70% of AI sits within security, right? So really, I think we're trying to figure out where does AI governance actually sit? Who owns it, right? Because it really does flow more horizontally than vertically.
I think it kind of reminds me of shopping at REI. Was it recreational equipment, something, I don't know what the I stands for, but all customers are also owners, shareholders of the company or something like that.
Sure.
I think AI is more like that. It's kind of chaotic at this point. It's hard to tell who owns it, but to that extent, yeah, I have noticed a lot of the companies I talk to, when I advise on AI, it's usually not just the security people on those calls.
Hmm.
It's the entire AI council. Like they've defined some kind of AI council internally that includes somebody from legal, somebody from HR, somebody from tech, somebody from the software engineering side of things, and a security person, of course.
Right.
But yeah, I think that is kind of what you have to do at this point. I don't think you need
Yeah.
an AI council indefinitely, but until you figure out who owns what, who's responsible for what, particularly when that GDPR fine comes in, that's you probably need it.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think the beautiful part about that is that those three pillars, security, governance, and privacy, have for the most part been acting pretty independently of each other for the past number of years, right? And I think what AI is doing is bringing those three, connecting the dots across those three, and kind of pulling them closer together, and said, "Hey, we're actually doing more of the same work than different work." And forcing collaboration between them, and I think that's a great thing.
There's a comment. Tell us more, Granddad. Tell us about the good old days. I think that's a reference. That's a response to your Dewey Decimal example.
Granddad, dang.
I'm old enough to be a granddad, but I'm not. I'm not yet. I don't know
Same,
about you. I can't
same.
speak for you.
Not same, same. That's
So
funny.
who do you typically find? If I can kind of put you on the spot here,
Yeah.
of some of the like big IDs, AI governance tools, who typically are the buyers and owners that you're talking to, or you're seeing, what budget are these tools coming out of?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it really across. It's hard to say, right? A lot from the AI piece, AI governance, probably seeing more of like the data organizations. Security also, I mean, usually has a bigger spend. Maybe, I mean, it all depends. At Nike, privacy had the money at first, right, and then
Mm-hmm.
then it shifted over. That budget was handed over, so. We really are stretched across really those three pillars for different use cases. Each company has their own use case for why they need a tool like Big ID, or why they need Big ID. And so, uh, and that AI governance piece I mean, it's great because you can talk to all three pillars about that, right? Because, like I said earlier, we're still trying to figure out per company who owns what, right? Because it's not as clear cut as, oh, this is a CISO responsibility, or this is a CPO responsibility. So the budget's coming across the board, probably more in security and data, but also privacy. That's a very political answer. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's a very comprehensive answer, I think, and it is. I imagine it is going to vary from company to company. It depends on how important data is to you and who owns data across the different parts of the company.
Right.
So we've got a question here. I think we can maybe take a few minutes to dive into. I'll just read it here. How do you foresee AI governance's role in agentic AI use cases? Consider an AI agent created by a healthcare institution and given as an app to the patient. This agent has all information. I'm not liking where this is going, by the way. The agent has all information on that patient, PHI, PII, patient talks to agent, which in turn goes and talks to primary care physicians with the intention to speed up healthcare issues resolution. Is this sort of a use case how you would architect in this sort of use case, how would you architect AI governance around this?
I'm gonna let you take this one, Adrian.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
that is probably the worst use case you could bring up, because it's just from a political, like a data ownership perspective, it's going to be so complex. It's going to differ from country to country, because the way
right.
healthcare systems work is very different from country to country. I think kind of the libertarian fever dream here is that you own all your own healthcare data. Nobody can touch it unless you unlock it for them. So you carry around like some kind of a secure flash drive, something
Mm,
like a cold wallet, like that kind of device. And you
right.
know, I mean, it is a nice thought in that no more can anybody try and charge you for moving your data from one provider to another, which is a real thing that happens. I've been
Hmm.
people tried to charge me just to send my data from my GP to a hospital or vice versa. And but then you have to worry about data recovery, right? Like what happens
Yeah.
if you lose your own
Yeah.
data, data resilience and stuff like that. But in an agentic use case, I think agentic is going to be really challenging, because it's a lot of API keys, it's a lot of machine identities, handing off data. We haven't talked about data flow diagrams yet, but that's probably where I would start with this is like map out a data flow diagram and okay, like
Mm,
who needs to have an agreement with who, to even make this, to even consider if it's possible to do this, or if two parties that have to work together are just going to say no and kill the whole idea there.
yeah. I think that um, I think the regulatory piece around um, like our medical records is probably going to prevent some of that. But on the other hand, right, if we're going to live in the future, I think making sure that we build those strong enough parameters, right? And we're talking about governance, right? We've got to be able to put those guardrails around what that agentic AI can do um, to make it safe for me and for you. So having a super strong guardrail, but not one that's like you said, like you don't want to be carrying a cold wallet around. Um, yeah, that's a tough one. And when you figure that one out, uh, I think you have a business use case.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think going back to the data flow diagram, you're talking earlier about how the data catalog works, and is that something where we have that? It, I imagine at least part of that can be automated these days. I remember back when I was a PCI QSA, which PCI focuses on payment data. One of the things we had to do is look for payment data where it's not supposed to be, and 100% of the
Mhm.
time, guess what I found? All right, what do you think I found?
Data where it wasn't supposed to be.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, so how much of that can be automated these days, and how valuable do you think it is to maintain some kind of data flow diagram?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important. The automation piece of that is something that can be done. I think when you talk data flow diagram, right, a little synonymous with lineage. Um, are we
Right.
talking like technical lineage or business lineage, right? Then there's a difference
Hmm.
there as well. But how the data gets from one point to another, right? Data is not just static anymore. It's moving all over the place. So Big ID has the ability to do a little bit of that as well, right? For those data flow diagrams, for a bit of the lineage piece as well, just through the automation, right? Through knowing where Dart is, right? I know as an entity of me, then oh hey, we know Dart's data lives across these things. It gets a little bit trickier when you go into the technical piece of it, right? Of like where did it actually start and live versus like and where are all the permutations of that. Still doable, but I do think it's a little bit more of a lift. Again, back to my Nike days, we would go in and sit down and we're like, oh, ask the the customer or the business owner, like, oh, do you have a data flow diagram? And they're like, yeah, I got one here somewhere. It's a couple of years old. And I'm like, that's no use to me, right? If it's a
Yeah,
couple of years old, it has
it's
changed
almost certainly
100
changed.
times since then, right? If it's a couple weeks old, probably it's still probably changed a little bit. But having the ability to connect those pieces of how that data flows, super important, and feels like Big ID can help with that.
Yeah, I would have to do packet captures, right, and scan file systems on hosts. I would have to go to that level to
Mm,
confirm, yes, the data is actually flowing through here. Are we using HTTPS or not? Is it encrypted on the wire? And I imagine at Nike, like there's a lot of different ways to buy Nike goods. Like there are options to buy direct from Nike. Like I'm
right.
sure there's like loyalty programs and clubs and stuff like that where PII flows in. And then if you buy from a store, I don't know if that data ever makes it to Nike, like your personal data. If you buy it from like just a sporting goods store, like a Dick's or something like that. But yeah, you'd want to understand all those flows, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think probably maybe not more than that, but just as equal to that is to be able to correlate all that data together, right? To say, oh, hey, here is the holistic piece of where your data is. Right here's how it flowed. Here's where it is, and that way, if you came and said, "Hey, as a European citizen, as California resident, whatever it is, right, delete my data or obfuscate it or give it to me, whatever," then we have the ability to do that, to raise that request and to actually action on that data, on that request.
So I'm trying to read a question here in the Q&A box. Yeah, so I think generally the question is, I think one of the executive orders around AI safety was revoked, and the question is, without regulatory guardrails, like what guarantees do we have that AI will develop ethically and address trustworthiness concerns? I think this might be a little bit outside of our pay grade. More of a, I mean, it is a political question, but to some
Mhm.
extent, we want to be, we don't want to be late adopters when it comes to
Right.
adopting regulations, and we don't want to have to completely redo how we're managing data and AI governance. If we've been traditionally more loose with it because we could get away with it. So I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think from again, without trying to get political, we saw Europe drive privacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw the GDPR, we saw it drive it. And so companies, global companies, adopted that pretty quickly. Nike, I mean, we started scanning. The lion's share of Nike's data was in US, right? It wasn't in Europe.
Right.
And so knowing like, but as a global company, we've got to comply with these other, or they had to comply with these, these other regulations. So I think you're going to see global type companies, enterprise type companies, go for like the most restrictive, because those
Yeah.
regulations usually they usually roll down, right? It doesn't usually, you're not going to get the most restrictive regulation, and then somebody's going to come and say, actually that one's, it's got too much goodness in it. We want less. Right. Usually you're going to see kind of that baseline. Now that's the most restrictive, that now becomes the baseline. So from an enterprise level, I'm not sure, again, without getting too political, how much how much merit would be put in that. That just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. Like in the U.S., if you break it down by state level regulations, California and Massachusetts, maybe New York with their, I forget the acronym for the New York thing, but they have a data specific regulations. That like you're not going to do business different in California than you do in the rest of the country, right?
Right.
That
Right.
kind of creates sets the bar for how you do
Hmm.
business in general. And yeah, if you do any business in Europe, again, that kind of sets the bar. Like it's probably more expensive to do business differently there, but we'll see what happens
Totally.
with Apple. Like will Lightning connectors continue to live here while it's all USB C over there? I doubt it.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Yeah, that would be crazy. Yeah. But yeah, no, very good answer there. If anybody has any more questions, it's this I think is the most engaged audience I've ever had on one of these webcasts. I think I can easily say that.
Either that's a good thing, Adrian, or that's a terrible thing. I'm going to take it as a good thing. So
it is absolutely a good thing. It's the webinars I worry about is where everybody's quiet. Like either we're getting everything right or we're putting everybody to sleep, and we have a very either caffeinated or engaged audience here.
I love it. I love it.
All right, and if there's nothing else, I think we're at a pretty good stopping point here. Dart, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Really enjoyed the conversation, learned some things. I hope the audience learned some things as well. If you haven't been looking through the chat, you've been missing out. There's been a lot of good education coming from our audience as well, which is always great. I love learning stuff from the audience. I now know it is 4%, not 2% GDPR. So good stuff. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Big ID, for making today's webcast possible. So thanks, Dart. This has been great.
Yeah. Thanks, Adrian. This was awesome. Appreciate it.
And finally, a big thanks to the audience for joining us, and we'll see you next time.